Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rosie, and I play Dead by Daylight, so you don't have to. I was gonna make a video on McLean today, but I'm finding that we're gonna have to save that for probably this weekend, or maybe even next weekend, because we have to do this right now. I'm sorry, this is very shit right here. This fucking video. What the problem? I think a really big problem with Scott. Okay, here's an actual huge problem he has. He rushes content. Like, to an extreme degree, he rushes content. He doesn't stop. He doesn't take a second. He doesn't let it sit in for a day or two. He doesn't do that. He rushes out the most awful conclusion you can possibly get from something. And then, of course, it's poked with holes. Like, it is riddled with holes, inconsistencies, flawed logic, to an absolute extreme degree. Whereas if he were to take a day or two, potentially anticipate an argument against his position, his content would not be nearly as flawed. Okay? But, you know, he doesn't matter. He doesn't need to clean up his content for the paycheck. The quicker he shits it out, the quicker the paychecks roll in. So he doesn't really have to even worry about what he's doing. But we're not letting him get away with it, lads, because he is going to analyze comp scene data. Oh, awesome! Comp scene data. The worst of both worlds coming together, ladies and gentlemen. This is absolutely fucking unbelievable. Jesus Christ. So let's check it out, bruh. What will this marriage of a pile of shit and a pile of vomit, they come together to create a beautiful 11 minutes of garbage. And let's check it out.
Hey guys, Scott here with a very interesting discussion today. I was told
Why does
by
Scott
Mathis on Twitter to
never
check out.
wear his hat, like, so the crest is even with his forehead? Like, I feel like it should be. It looks off center. It's just a mess.
This tournament held by a player named Wispy, and in this tournament it featured extremely good teams, some of the absolute best, and it was a tournament in which there were zero restrictions on either side. So what that means is exactly what that means. You could bring anything and everything, whatever thing you could possibly equip was allowed, which is very different from most other tournaments, right?
Okay. Now, in regards to that whole tournament idea, I think that's actually probably one of the better rule sets that I've heard in a while. He doesn't talk about how scoring was done. So there's still probably some ways to poke holes in the actual competitive rule set. Comp rule sets tend to be a fucking joke. But as far as absolutely no restrictions, that's actually a better idea than some of the other ones I've ever heard. However, I'm also against a no restriction rule set. I think there are ways that you can make the game better designed while by limiting some of the absolute broken shit. And like my rules have always been, like, I have my own rule set up there. As long as it doesn't like you know, make the game look fucking stupid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as long as, like, the core of the actual game isn't violated, it's legal. Something like a brand new part violates the game's core violates a core rule of the game's mechanics, which is 80 seconds on a gen. So there is precedence within the game to ban that item from a competitive rule set. However, compared to the shit that the comp scene is doing, no restrictions was actually a far better rule set than some of the other ones. So I applaud that.
The whole thing, the whole sentiment that I want to tackle here is that at the highest level with the strongest stuff survivors can bring, killers basically have no chance. And that's why in high-level tournaments, there's a bunch of restrictions on survivors so they do have a chance, right? But this tournament kind of proved that that's not really the case. If we actually look at the data assembled by...
First of all, I don't know why Scott forgot his own point about the comp scene's inability to actually measure skill. That's actually a point that cripples the idea of a competitive Dead by Daylight. The idea that actually destroys the notion of a competitive Dead by Daylight is the fact that the map RNG is inconsistent, and the fact that one map doesn't actually equal another, and you pick the same map at the same time. Okay? That is the actual notion that destroys the fundamental competitive scene. the idea of a competitive scene. That is what kills it. Okay, because that problem is actually in the game. The amount of data these quote unquote comp scenes show is actually really bad. Okay, so that's the very, very first thing. Like the concept of map RNG means you are free to laugh at any attempt at a competitive rule set.
A forum user named Czar, he made a super really detailed data analysis of this whole tournament. I'll link that in the description.
Okay, let's check that out. I have that pulled up over here.
Did better than you would think. In fact, they got more kills than not. The average kills were 2.16 over all of the actual matches, which is probably more than you would expect when survivors can literally bring 4 brand new parts with 4 Commodious toolboxes, 4 DS, Unbreakable, Dead Hard. They all had basically the same cookie cutter, insanely ridiculously strong stuff, and the killers did just fine. In fact, the matches were surprisingly balanced, and that was surprising even to me, because even I thought, I'm very
Why was that surprising to you? Why was that surprising to you? Let's take a look at this rule at this set here. You ready, guys? Nurse, Blight, Nurse, Spirit, Blight, 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 Nurse, Nurse, Blight, Pinhead, Nurse, Blight, Huntress, Nurse, 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 Blight, Spirit, Nurse, 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 Spirit, Blight, Spirit, Oni, Blight, Nurse. How many of those characters are Keystone, ladies and gentlemen? Prior to the boons coming into the game, you would have 2 of those being Keystone. There'd be Pinhead and Huntress, okay, who were one-offs. So outliers. Every other killer in that section is above Keystone. And there's a reason for that. They can counter things like DS and Dead Hards and there's the Oni, Blight, Nurse. They can do things and have a good enough chase to where they are able to deal with that kind of bullshit. Okay? And that does not prove anything beyond anything, because I keep saying this. The characters you must analyze for are the Keystones. How the hell? Let's check it out. How'd that Pinhead do? 1K, 6 hook stages. The Pinhead lost. The Huntress got a 3K. So the Huntress did actually win. The Pinhead lost. So, and of course, you can obviously throw out that one Huntress win as an outlier. It's shown by the fact it was not repeated at all in this tournament. You can just feel free to throw that out as an outlier. So there's a huge fucking things here. The Ebony Memento Moris that the killers usually burn, on the other hand, consistently made much more of a difference. So Moris were allowed into this tournament to counter Decisive Strike. Nurse's range, Spirit's Mother, Alchemist's Ring, brand new parts, Styptic Syringes, blatantly overtuned. Yeah. I think Swift groups should have perk and item limitations in place, such as they can bring any perk / at most one time. That's actually, and then the killer add-on should simply be rebalanced. So survivors need restrictions, killers need completely retuned because they're poorly designed. So already this has fucking Moris and all kinds of other shit that makes it so separated from what any ideal rule set would actually be. Like, do you understand? So already this tournament can be thrown out, okay? Not that it's even like the worst rule set that can exist. Like, saying you have to throw this out does not at all make this the worst rule set I've ever seen in my life. Every other comp rule set is way worse than this, specifically because their bans are way too specific, and the character-specific bans is a shit idea, okay? This was shit in the fact that they went the other extreme. But I think this was less shit than the over-restrictive, if that makes any sense. Moris, I question the idea of letting those in, and of course those were there to counter the decisive strikes to secure other kills that wouldn't have had otherwise. So a lot of those 2Ks, I wish he would have specified in this chart right here if Moris were used in each match. I have a feeling that they were in a lot of the time. So Scott doesn't mention that at all in this fucking video, and I wonder why, because Moris are not in base game. So that's a huge other problem when you're saying that the game is fucking perfectly balanced. Moris were in the fucking game.
Of the opinion that people drastically overstate how strong Survivor is. I do think there are certain issues, mainly more to like due to map design and stuff like that. But I didn't think that at the absolute maximum stuff you can bring, killers would really stand a chance. But apparently they did. And
Why would you not think that? Why would you not think that? The ability to negate a DS off second hook, the ability for everybody to do that, why would you not think that killers can secure more 2Ks and 3Ks at the highest level of play? Not that these guys are the highest level. I don't think that. I think at mid-highest level, you give every killer the ability to counter decisive strike off second hook with the Moris. Like, excuse me? Like, it's for real. Apparently, No Way Out did well, which I find that ridiculous. Early game is like a lot of these huge notes say things we already know if you know about high level. Let's see what this says here. 73 of the matches were killer victories in terms of hook stages. Especially why you can't look at that to determine anything, because there's a lot more 1Ks and 0Ks and 2Ks than anything else. A lot more ties and survivor victories than killer wins. So looking at the hook state continues to be actually flawed in terms of a win condition for the game. Players didn't usually pick other killers for obvious reasons. At least those three can compete with the absolute best of the best at a survivor side. I still think in a very, when you don't allow Moris and shit like that, an actual really actual competitively minded rule set, Survivor's 4-man Swift is the strongest thing in the game, despite everything that, like, an actual balanced rule set.
With Nurse Spirit Blight, fucking Nightlight played the artist in one of the final matches and did great.
Now, that match actually isn't recorded on here. He only recorded 30 matches. I don't know if his chart's just not done yet, or is there more that I'm missing? No, I don't see that in his actual statistics, so I can't tell you how good the artist did. I think it's clear that the artist is actually better than average. Or I think people I think her nerf was bad, and it shouldn't have happened, but I think she's still at least Keystone, possibly even higher than that still. So I don't think saying artist did well is, especially since she's new and the counterplay is still developing, I don't think saying artist did well is fair quite yet. There's a lot of reasons why she could have done better than she normally would, and the fact that she is still okay. So saying that doesn't do much for me either.
So it's actually way less survivor-sided at maximum level than I thought.
No.
So
absolutely not. Because in order for the killers to actually compete, the stuff that you have to let in is flawed. Like, you have to allow the Moris in. You have to allow the stuff that would also be banned from any decent rule set that looks at the killer at an objective level. Okay, and not saying that the competitive rule set's definitely the way we should go. I think there's still precedence to where you could say, okay, as a survivor, I'm gonna get to ban 2 add-ons before the start of the match. Like, there's stuff like that. So, like, realistically, killers in an actual balanced rule set, they might see one of their better add-ons as opposed to, all of them. You know what I mean? There's still ways to pick and choose, boosting the strength of the killer a little bit without going too overboard. Actual intelligent limitations, where the actual comp scene goes fucking ridiculous with limitations. It's so much so that it's just straight up not Dead by Daylight anymore. And this was the other extreme, as we've just said.
Whole mindset I wanted to tackle. Whenever you hear somebody say that they want the game to be balanced around the highest level, well, this is basically the highest level, right? So they want the game to be balanced around that. I think, because it's interesting.
That's a point I'm just going to grant for the sake of argument. I still don't think these players are top 1%, but that's all right.
You hear people say that. It's never a survivor saying that. It's always a killer saying.
Because why would survivors want to balance the game around the 1% and get rid of their advantage? That's why survivors never say it. Killers say it because they want the game to be fair.
That. And I think what they're actually saying is not that I want the game to be balanced around high level. I think they're actually saying I want killer to be easy.
Look at the camping going on here.
I don't intend that to be a shameful statement.
Look at the camping taking place here. He's already camping. How many gens are left? 4?
Especially due to map design.
He's camping with 4 gens left. Like, he's playing defensively already. Okay? Look at the amount of defensive play going on here already. Okay? It's just terrible.
It's not like a shameful statement. But I actually believe that's really what they mean. And I think you can prove that. The next time you hear somebody say, I want the game to be balanced around the highest level.
I want the game to be balanced around high level.
So, okay, let's do that. All right, so we need to nerf Compound 33. We got to nerf Blight.
Sure.
We got to nerf Alchemist Ring, Blighted Crow. We got to nerf Mother's Daughter's Ring. We get a nerf range
Sure.
add-ons. We get a nerf tombstone piece.
Sure.
Just start listing off a bunch of killer nerfs
Okay, so that just got disproved.
that you would have to do to match a comp rule set.
No, not to match a comp rule set, to make the roster more keystone. You think comp is a bigger part of balancing around the top 1% than it actually is. Comp is useless. Those guys are in their own little deranged little fucking world. Okay? They're useless. I'd throw out all their data. Their data's horrible. And, yeah, cool. Like, what you're doing is, why you're nerfing Tombstone Piece? You're nerfing Tombstone Piece because it drastically changes Myers to where he breaks core rules of Dead by Daylight, where he has to hook people and kill them via the hooks. He's getting to straight up just mori somebody. That's why you nerf Tombstone Piece. Not because of the reason he just listed. You're nerfing all this stuff because it's changing how your characters work to an extreme degree that goes against their base kits. That's why you're nerfing it. Okay? It's changing the characters too much to be away from their base kit. Okay? I don't think this was hard to understand, but Scott Judd's apparently 2 years behind all of us.
And if at any point during you listing these killer nerfs, they say, what are you doing? No, we need to be nerfing the Survivor. You know that they don't actually care about balancing with the highest level. They just want their killer matches to be easier.
No, and let's explain that. When you're talking about the biggest issues in Dead by Daylight, they are the Survivor issues. So if you have to make a scale about what we're hitting first, Survivors need to be hit first. Because how strong they are is dictating the way killers play the game. Do you understand? A healthy core starts with Survivor nerfs. So if any killer asks you, what are you doing when you're talking about nerfing killer first? Yes, they are absolutely in the right to ask that, because it shows you don't understand the problems with the game. And it shows that you don't care about addressing the highest priority issues, which are the Survivors being too strong, forcing the killers to play very campy to achieve a balanced match. And listing killer nerfs first proves your own stupidity and proves that you don't actually want to analyze what is the best way to achieve a balanced game state. I'm on fire! Okay.
Because at the highest level, people actually realize that killers got some pretty broken shit that they can bring too. And this tournament, I think, was a perfect example.
I've never met anybody that has ever claimed that that's not the case. Like, I feel like the Scott's imaginary enemies, like, are just, what is the easiest position for me to go after? And then I'm gonna go after that. He doesn't actually think about a counter argument to his position before he just blurts out something. He doesn't think, well, what if there's somebody intelligent like Rosie watching my video and who can actually shred all of my basic arguments? I need to go a little more deep and a little more complex. He doesn't do that because he can't reason beyond. He's not at the level that we are, ladies and gentlemen. He's just not quite there. He's like, again, this is why he's Wile E. Coyote. He's 2 years behind the rest of us. Like, all of this stuff was shit I was thinking about 2 years ago. And last year, when I reworked Myers myself and nerfed Tombstone Piece myself in an add-on section. Okay? So, like, this is like, ridiculous. He doesn't have any proper ability to effectively analyze a counter-argument that could happen and try to bait it. Okay? He has no idea how to do that. No idea. Especially, I don't know why he's kissing this tournament's ass when he is the one that is responsible for the most effective argument against the competitive scene in the first place.
Of killers bringing broken
Look at the
shit
artist
and
just camping
having
here, dude.
actually extremely balanced matches.
Nice camping,
Now,
bro.
The thing is, the matches, it's not like they got an average of 2 kills per match or anything like that. First of all, to address the whole, well, you can do that with any killer, just face camp one guy, face camp another before the
Kind of like the artist is doing right here.
No, because the average hook states was above 8.5, I think, which indicates that, you know, if you were just face...
Let's make sure that's right. I think it says it here. Deviation. Average stages 8.46. What did he say?
Got an average of 2 kills per match or anything like that. First of all, to address the whole, well, you can do that with any killer, just face camp one guy, face camp another before the end game, that's 2 kills. No, because the average hook states was above 8.5, I think.
Yeah,
which
no, it's
indicates
8.46.
that, you know, if
8.46, and it says stages. It doesn't say hooks. Huh.
you were just face camping 2 people, that's 6 hook states. And then people would just leave, right? Also, the tournament incentivized you to hook people more than once because there was a bonus for hooking per somebody a second time.
It's some points favored garbage that's right there.
73% of matches had at least 7 stages of hooks in them, which indicates that it was not people just face camping. It was people actually going for multiple hooks too. So that's not really an argument to it. But the thing is, that's not really...
I don't know. This chart doesn't really say 10 stages, 1. Oh, here we go. 3 stages, 1. Stages, 5, 4, 3. The most 12 stages, 8. So the most common amount of hook stages was 12, but that doesn't make any sense because 4K happened. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there were 20 hook stages in that. I think this is a very poorly designed chart. I wish he would rework it and explain it better. The chart provided by Zara is bad. It doesn't really make much sense. It seems intentionally designed to kind of be flawed. Let's see. I can't read this, bro. Deviation, blah, 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 blah. 3K's 3, 2K's 6, 1K's 12. So, yeah, okay, so if you're getting a 1K, if there were 12 1Ks in this tournament, it was the most common result. Okay? So, yeah, sure. So, killers, 3Ks and 4, there were 12 1Ks, so 11 killer victories, 13 killer losses with 6 ties. Okay. 1K being the most common result, and I don't know what I'm expected to get from that as I read it.
The data works because of averages, and this game is asymmetrical. The game is usually going to be a stomp on one side or the other, but the funny thing is that's not really an issue of balance at all. If you have an asymmetrical game, it's going to work like that, even if your game is perfectly balanced. As soon as you kill one player, it snowballs out of control immediately. So that is how...
Okay, let me look at let's check this out. Blight, 1K, 6 hook stages. Spirit, 1K, 7 stages. 1K, 6 stages, 1K, 6 stages for 2 nurse matches. Pinhead, 1K, 6 stages. 1K for a nurse, 6 stages. In the games where 1K is happening, they are getting around 6 to 7 hook stages every time. This is precedent for hook stages not meaning much, as I kind of predicted. So let me analyze that again.
Stomp on one side or the other. Camping was people just leave, right? Also, the tournament incentivized you to hook people more than once because there was a bonus for hooking per somebody a second time. And if I think 73% of matches had at least 7 stages of hooks in them, which indicates that it was not people just face camping. It was people actually going.
Yes, but in those matches, they were losing. 6 stages, 7 stages, 1K. So obviously that incentive wasn't really working, or it was just something that they were going to abuse the fact that there was more incentive to go hook somebody else than to actually play the game right. And to add, so like there still seems to be a precedence to just trying to give an artificial boost in the rule set to ignore the meta. And that still seemed, there you go, that's what we're looking for. It was kind of hidden by the way this chart is so clunkily put together, but that seems to be what I'm seeing here. There seems to be, when the killer's realizing they're going to lose, there seems to be an incentive to get as many hook stages as possible, 1K, rather than trying to turn it around into a 2K and get less stages. I think that's what's happening there. And so it's incentivizing the killer when they're losing to not face camp. So they can maximize those points values right there. He doesn't really say the rules in this shit. But yeah, so again, that is another artificial change to base game that they have to make so killer can kind of keep up and score more points.
For multiple hooks too. So that's not really an argument to it.
So yes, it is.
That's not really how the data works because of averages, and this game is asymmetrical. The game is usually going to be a stomp on one side or the other. But the funny thing is that's not really an issue of balance at all. If you have an asymmetrical game, it's going to work like that, even if your game is perfectly balanced. As soon as you kill one player, it snowballs out of control immediately. So that is how you hear the sentiment that it's going to be a stomp or you're going to get stomped. And that's kind of true for any asymmetrical game, but that's not really an issue of balance or anything like that. So one of the things that I also want to talk about as well is that when you bring up stuff like this, you go, okay, well, it's only Nurse, Spirit, or Blight that are able to do this. That indicates, most of the roster is unusable against this. And there's some truth and some also not great logic in there as well.
Okay, there was absolutely no not great logic in there. Their Spirit and Blight dominated this whole tournament. And with these first 30 games that they're listed here, there's only 2 characters that are not them. And one of them lost. And so there you go.
Well, I mean, you're literally watching Nightlight play the artist right now. But let's actually go into that. So when you're talking about that kind of data, you can't just pick and choose which data you want to listen to.
We already discussed the artist and why that's not really something that you're allowed to do yet.
Just say, oh, well, only Nurse, Spirit, and Blight can win at this level. So obviously we still got a problem with the game. And then at the same time, compare it to Survivors bringing the strongest thing they can bring. Because Survivors don't have powers. They have perks and add-ons. And that's what they can bring. So to make a comparison to a double blink, 4 slowdown Ebony Mori Nurse, you have to, bring in 4 DS Unbreakable Dead Hard, 4 BNPs. That's like the equivalent to that, right? But you're not making a comparison to Survivors like...
Not necessarily. There's no equivalent to the killer's power on the Survivor end. There is no equivalent to that. In Identity 5 there is, because Survivors have their own powers. But in Dead by Daylight, the idea of selecting a character is no, there is nothing on the Survivor end that is comparable to that. A DS Unbreakable Dead Hard Borrowed Time build is the equivalent to a Ruin Undying Pop Corrupt, something like that. Tinkerer Pop Ruin Corrupt build. Something like that. Like those builds clash each other out. What the process of character selection as a killer has no equivalence to what the Survivors are. It's just its own thing in its entirety. Okay?
When have you ever seen a Survivor run Technician or Left Behind or Sole Survivor in a tournament? That would be the equivalent of bringing like a clown into a tournament.
No, it's running Technician in the tournament is the equivalent to bringing Zacian Tactics into a tournament. Running Technician is the equivalent to bringing a Monster Shrine into a tournament, not to picking Clown. There are a total, ladies and gentlemen, of 101 Survivor perks compared to 24 characters, 24, 25 characters. There is a number disparity there. The idea of picking a character is absolutely 100% its own stat that has no comparable thing on the Survivor end. Absolutely not. That statement there is bullshit.
Both sides, of course, no one's expecting anything from either of those things. Survivors that have no or terrible perks are remarkably easier to kill than Survivors that have the meta.
Okay, let's see if I can illustrate that point. Let's say you have four perks, okay? Pretend that every Survivor is forced to take out Decisive Strike and put in Technician, okay? But the killers don't know this. You and your 4-man Swift, you all take out DS and you put Technician in. And then you're playing against a Clown who has the meta. Who is going to win that match? Who's going to win that match? Obviously, the guy picking Clown made the bigger mistake. Okay? You can get away, realistically, with having a Technician in your build. While the killer cannot get away with picking Clown. There's a huge difference than running a bad perk versus picking a bad character. And his attempts to kind of bring those together are ridiculous.
Guys, remember the whole Deep Pip Squad experiment. I went against them as Huntress without Iridescent Head on Swamp when I was still I only been playing the game for a year. And I was still able to win because...
You did not win, you tied. Do I need to pull that video up? Yeah, you tied them with no perks. But when they had no perks, you tied them.
They didn't have perks. They didn't have the meta. I had to slug people a lot, and if they could have dead-hearted several hatches, that would have made me lose. If they had perks, I almost definitely would have lost.
No, you would have. There's no almost definitely.
So if you have Survivors that bring in way weaker builds, it's not like you're comparing it to the same thing. So my whole point with this is you need to compare the strongest stuff a killer can bring to the strongest stuff a survivor can bring. Once we see people start bringing technician in a tournament,
See the Mori?
then you can start
Note the
saying, well,
Mori.
Legion can't work in this tournament, so this game is broken. Because then, yeah, now we're comparing low-tier shit to low-tier shit. You can't compare Legion to bringing the best perks and add-on survivors can bring. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, see, there's no comparable thing. So a Legion running the meta versus Swift running the meta, the only reason you say, well, you can't compare that is because Legion sucks. It's not that the survivors, it's that the keystone characters are bad enough to the point where they're not viable. So Legion it's towards super not viable. Okay? The relationship to the characters is almost the only way you can kind of compare characters is tile spawning. Like but again, the survivors don't really have control over that. But like that's the kind of thing that can influence the power of the role of survivor, I guess. If you get really busted spawns, that's the kind of thing that has the impact of a character, if you will. But no, you can't do that.
Disingenuous argument. You compare the top tier to the top tier. That's how you have to do it. So the fact that only a couple of killers can really, compete at this level, it also, only a handful of really good perks are going to be able to beat those killers at that.
And again, I will also argue that any scene of this game that only has 3 viable killers is still not a healthy scene, okay? Identity 5 has 10 viable killers now, or I think it's gone up. I think it's 12 now. I think they have 12. Half of their roster is viable. Dead by Daylight having 3 viable characters is not a demonstration of a healthy scene. Yes, the characters in Identity 5 are not as good as the meta characters, so they don't get picked as much in tournaments, but the fact is they are still viable. A Disciple player won KOA 4, okay? I don't know where Disciple is on the tier list now, but the last time I checked before that tournament, she was barely viable. And in America, she sucked ass. And America rated her really bad. So, even if it's balanced, okay, like Scott Jun is going it's way too far in the other direction now. Even if it's balanced, that also doesn't make it healthy. He's taking it too far in the other direction, okay? What we need is a balanced and healthy competitive scene. The reason that both people like myself have stressed the balance so much is that the balance is the best way to achieve game health in the future. Like, those issues are now synced, okay? But if this was the idea, if this is the scenario that is happening every single game, which it should be at high MMR, if you're trying to really run the optimal stuff, this is the kind of shit on both sides that the idea of top percent balancing is there to eradicate, okay? So saying that it's good is not right. This is the stuff that we want to see eradicated from Dead by Daylight, so that we can have around half the roster viable. Okay? So saying, yeah, it's there, bro. Great. I already knew that, and I've been trying to fix it for a year. What the fuck have you been doing with your life? Besides wearing your hat wrong.
Level as well. If you have 4, perkless survivors going against a double range Mori nurse, they're going to win every single time. They can't dead hard their hits. They can't deal with getting slugged. They can just get tunneled off the hook. Like, having perks and add-ons so drastically changes the matches that, here, I'm running out of B-roll here. Let's go to a different match. So that it just so drastically changes the matches. You have to really compare it to top tier, and you have to compare killer powers to survivors, perks, and add-ons, because survivors don't have killer power, so that's the only metric you can actually compare.
As I said, there is no comparable metric to the killer's power, okay? And again, if you would like to run the same tournament with Technician on everyone's build, and then you can run only low tiers, I'm sure there's going to be 0-1Ks out the ass at that tournament.
Right? So that's kind of like the main thing that I wanted to talk about. That at the absolute highest level, this game is not really as imbalanced as you would think it is. And according to this data, it's actually pretty remarkably balanced in terms of,
oh yeah, remarkable.
Of a bit over 2 kills with around 8.5 hook states. That's actually amazing data, and I'm glad.
See, and again, it's not that good of data because we already discussed that there's an incentive to make you go get more hook states besides securing your kills, which is why I'm assuming that you see a high amount of hook states on 1Ks. So there's too much stretching of base game. This is not like what you would actually do for a competitively minded rule set. The Keystones did not get any representation at this tournament, proving what we already know. They're all fucking trash. There was one outlier. Artist, it's still too early to actually know how to deal with her as effectively as the other characters, so it's easier to get gimmicked. What else is left?
Showed me the stuff because it actually kind of blew my mind. I even thought that this would not be the case.
And like I said, it really shouldn't have. If you know anything about Dead by Daylight, you know that if especially if Moris are allowed, these kinds of things are something you should expect to see. You understand? Stages may imply camping is allowed as well. It really does.
If you're bringing 4 BMPs every match and stuff like that, how does the killer ever win? But apparently they were doing just fine. So it's a very interesting statement. If you say you want the game to be balanced around the highest level, you have to acknowledge that you actually have to nerf a lot of killer stuff too, which is something I don't think people that ever say you should balance around high level will ever actually like agree to.
And I already did,
because
so
this
that's
shows
out.
at the absolute highest level.
Again, we already
the
knew
game
that,
somehow
Scott.
kind of works.
It
Closing
doesn't.
statement,
It
though.
doesn't work though. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. What you're doing is changing the game so drastically from base to the point where this is still arguments against every rule set I've ever seen. You're still changing the game too far from base Dead by Daylight for it to ever be accurate. I have never seen a competitive rule set for any other game that has to go in and alter the game's core to work. You can bring Moris, which is something that's not in base game. It's not in a base match without you bringing it. It's not intended in the actual core design of the rules of Dead by Daylight. Moris are not there. It doesn't work. You have to continually give incentives for killers to go out and hook people more than once to avoid the camping problem. So many issues with Dead by Daylight that continue to plague it from being good. Of course, the core is still entirely unstable because of a map RNG, which negates any real tournament from actually showing skill at all. So it doesn't work. Like, where does he think it works? He's never said a competitive tournament works until this one. I guess it's because it helps prove his point that we shouldn't nerf Survivor, even though we should.
Despite all of that, it still feels unbalanced, right? And that's the most important part.
And then here's where Scott...
Like. You can throw all these numbers and data at me.
Here's where Scott has another creamgasm on MMR. He just bashes MMR, which the ranking system is way worse, so I don't get that.
Hey, but the game's the case. If every match was like that, the game would actually be balanced. Literal babies the next game, so
MMR bad.
MMR in a different direction. The problem is you never know what you're actually going to be getting at map design. You know, if you have a very small, coal tower, you have a much better chance of winning as killer than if you have, Mother's Dwelling or something
That's
like
map
that.
issues. So you know what? I think that's the conclusion. This data's fucking useless, okay? This data's useless. Scott's interpretation of the data is useless. It's all useless. I hope Scott fucking learns to fucking calm his ass down and sit on some stuff before he makes videos and makes a fucking ass of himself. Okay, boys, I'm getting the hell out of here. Feels good to crush this notion. The game is trash. The game is unbalanced. Survivors destroy the killers if they're good, and the rule set's actually what it should be. Alright, I'm getting the hell out of here, lads. G fucking G's. It's always good to destroy Scoot and the quote-unquote comp scene at the same time. I'm getting the hell out of here.